At 37, the prospect of a high school reunion wasn't something I'd exactly been looking forward to. The idea of rekindling old friendships, revisiting the past, and reliving memories both fond and painful had been haunting my mind for weeks. But there I was, flying into the nearest airport and renting a car for the 35-mile drive through a rural stretch of country that seemed as forgotten as the friendships I was about to rekindle. The road was narrow, flanked by fields that stretched endlessly into the horizon, with only the occasional dilapidated barn or weather-beaten house to break the monotony. The sky was overcast, casting the landscape in a dreary, gray light that seemed to sap the color from the world. As I neared the town, the road began to curve more sharply, winding through a stretch of dense woods that seemed to close in on the car like a dark tunnel. About 3 miles outside of town, I saw a figure on the side of the road, waving me down. The sight was so unexpected that I nearly swerved off the road. Slowing to a stop, I realized it was a man, looking a little worse for wear, but familiar. "Jim," I called out as I rolled down the window. My mind raced, trying to place the face that seemed oddly unchanged by time. "Hey, man," Jim replied with a wide grin, as if no time had passed since we last saw each other. I hadn't seen Jim in 20 years, but he looked much the same, maybe a little older, with a few more lines on his face and a touch of gray in his hair. "You need a ride?" I asked, still trying to shake the unease that had settled in my gut. It was strange seeing him here, on this lonely stretch of road, miles from anywhere. "Yeah, thanks," Jim said, opening the door and sliding into the passenger seat. "It's good to see you again." As we drove into town, we talked about the old days, reminiscing about high school, mutual friends, and the trouble we used to get into. The conversation felt natural, like we were picking up right where we'd left off, yet something about it felt off, like a radio slightly out of tune. When we reached the edge of town, I asked, "You want to come to the VFW?" Jim shook his head. "No, just take me home." I nodded, turning down the street that led to his parents' old house, a few blocks from where my grandmother had lived. But Jim spoke up again. "No, not there. Take me to the outskirts, near the mobile home park." I was puzzled, but didn't question it. People move. Lives change. Maybe his parents had sold the house, and he'd settled somewhere quieter. The mobile home park on the edge of town was a little rundown, but it wasn't unusual for someone looking to save a few bucks. We reached the turnoff, and I slowed the car. "This good?" I asked. "Yeah, just drop me here," Jim said, his tone suddenly distant. He opened the door and got out, standing by the side of the road as if waiting for something. "It was good to see you again," he said, his voice trailing off as he turned and walked into the darkness. I watched him go, a strange feeling of finality settling over me, like the closing of a book. At the VFW, I met up with some old classmates, and we started talking, sharing stories, and laughing about the good old days. As the night wore on, the conversation turned to who was coming to the reunion, and I casually mentioned that I'd just picked up Jim a few miles east of town. The effect was immediate. The room fell silent. The guy singing karaoke stopped mid-song, his voice dying in his throat as he put down the microphone. My cousin, who'd been laughing only moments before, went pale, his face as white as a sheet. "Barb," he said, his voice shaking. "Jim died on that curve 8 years ago." Rolled his car. We were all at his funeral. A chill ran down my spine. The room seemed to spin, and I felt dizzy, like the floor had dropped out from under me. I stumbled outside, needing fresh air, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the VFW. I leaned against my car, taking deep breaths, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. It had to be a mistake, a joke, something, but as I opened the car door to sit down, I froze. There, on the passenger seat where Jim had sat, was a newspaper yellowed with age. The date at the top read 8 years ago to the day. My hands trembling, I unfolded it, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw the headline. "Local man dies in car accident." Below was a picture of Jim, the same face I'd seen just hours before, smiling back at me. His obituary was printed beneath, detailing the tragic accident on the very curve where I'd picked him up. I still have that newspaper. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, trying to convince myself it was all a dream, a trick of the mind. But deep down, I know what I saw, who I spoke to that night. Did this story really happen? Or was it just the overworked imagination of a writer? Did we get you on this one? Is it real or fake? Have you heard this story before? Or does it sound like something you may have heard? Or did we just make the whole thing up? You tell us. Comment below. What do you think? I will reveal the real and the fake ones on December 18th.